Thank you, everybody. It's a pleasure and honor for me to be here tonight. I thank Anthony Jones for extending the invitation to me. And the first item of business I have is I want to compliment the three people who are going to be recognized after I'm finished. Of course, the big question in everybody's mind is, when will he be finished? But Trevon, Angella, and Ron, I congratulate all of you for your achievements and contributions. Now, at this time, I'm going to call a former student of mine up here, Mr. Costin, to kindly step right up here, if he will. Now, I have an award here, but I'm not going to give it to you. This fine young man was a student in my entrepreneur class in the fall, and I can remember very clearly when he came in to my office with two of his friends following our first class. It was an evening class, and it was way past my bedtime, but I was willing to talk to them anyway. And this gentleman said that he was presently the president of OBC. Is that not correct?
It is correct.
Now that sparked a memory in my mind, because hanging in my office for many, many years has been this plaque. And I hadn't thought of it recently, but you prompted me. And it said, Professor David M. Miller, OBC would like to thank you for being our advisor. And it was a privilege and honor for me to be the last faculty member to serve as advisor to the OBC. And after my tenure was up, they brought in a full-time director of diversity, a lovely, lovely lady, Daisy Bell Quinney Thomas. Now, how many remember Daisy Bell? She was a very, very special lady. And I want to tell you two things that she did, which I'm forever grateful for. One of the first programs Daisy Bell instituted was the Soul Food Dinner. I love it. And I can remember the first dinner. At that time, she had it catered by a man from down in the valley, Guy Gibbs, who was Brianna Gibbs' uncle, if you remember Brianna, who graduated last year. And she was active in the group, I think. My wife has always been a great fan of sweet potatoes, and I could never stomach them. Until Guy Gibbs made his presentation at the Soul Food Dinner, and Guy made me a believer. They were delicious sweet potatoes, and I eat his at every opportunity, but not my wife's. Congratulations, and I commend you for your leadership.
Thank you.
Now, when Anthony asked me to speak tonight, he prefaced his invitation by saying that I'd been around here a long time, and that was reinforced by Madison. You notice I didn't run up to the podium. I very carefully walked up to it. But I want to share with you 5 vignettes from my lifetime that I think are relevant for what we're about here tonight. Madison was very kind, and I didn't know she was going to do this, to mention that I was president of the Mercer County Historical Society for 42 years and served on their board 8 more years beside that. And it was a great joy of my life to do that. I love history. And we had a wonderful group of people that were part of that society. And one of the groups that worked with us and was part of our society was a group of Civil War reenactors. And they were very, very active, and they had the costumes, and they performed at numerous occasions. And not about 10 years ago, they came to the board meeting and said, we have identified a grave marker in the Mercer Cemetery that is a Civil War veteran, and it is showing its age, and it's gotten to the point where you can hardly read the script that's written on it. Well, in our meeting, we said, now, what is the name on this marker? And they had done their homework. And they told a very, very interesting story that I want to share with you. The name on the marker was Robert Sylvester Reed. And they did a thorough search on the Reed family, and they found a very interesting narrative. Robert's father was John Fountain Reed. And John Fountain Reed walked from Carlisle, Pennsylvania to Mercer, Pennsylvania, looking for an opportunity in the year 1830. And he happened to arrive in Mercer on a Sunday morning, and he was walking up Erie Street where there is a church, and one of the people who's a member of the church saw him coming, and they invited him in for the service. And this Presbyterian church was integrated. It had both white and black members in 1830. And he came in and stayed for the service, and that changed his life because he met a young lady there by the name of Cindy Adams. And after church, the Adams family invited him to their home for dinner, and he went, and I don't know how long the courtship lasted, but he and Cindy were ultimately married, and the family stayed in Mercer 5 generations. But Cindy and John Fountain had 6 children, 3 boys and 3 girls. And in 1861, of course, the Civil War took place. And a year or two after that, President Lincoln announced the Emancipation Proclamation. And this gave an opportunity for black men to serve in the Union Army. And these 3 Reed brothers walked from Mercer to Pittsburgh to join the Union Army. Now, there's something you need to know. The horrors of battle in the Civil War we're all familiar with. The death rate was high. The injuries were almost all fatal because of medical care at that time. But the Confederate Army had a policy. They did not take black military members of the Union Army prisoner. They were either executed or they were sold into slavery. So on top of all the horrors of war, these 3 blacks, along with all other blacks, faced this additional horror that if they were captured, what lay ahead for them. Now the 3 brothers got to Pittsburgh, and they found out the army was segregated and there was no black unit available to them to join. But there was one forming in Boston. So they were given train tickets and sent to Boston. Now some of you may remember that wonderful movie, starring Denzel Washington, Glory. Anyone remember that movie? Glory. Now that was a story of the 54th Division, an all-black unit, as the movie depicted. Well, when the three brothers got to Boston, that was filled, and they were forming another unit called the 55th Massachusetts. And these men proudly served. They fought in several battles in the Carolinas, and Robert did sustain a wound to his hand, but he recovered. And after the war, they were discharged, brought back to Pittsburgh, and walked from there back to Mercer. And when the board of the society heard this story, there was never any question. We want to move ahead and have a new monument made for this gentleman, this very brave soldier, Robert Sylvester Reed. And I think it was around 2010, the monument was complete. The Civil War reenactors formed an honor guard. The local division of the NAACP came over and performed a very fine dedication ceremony, and that monument is now visible in the Mercer Citizen Cemetery. We have a lot of local history right here, and you stumble across it, and you find some amazing stories of brave people. Now, advancing about 100 years. In 1957, I walked on the campus of Worcester as a freshman. And like every freshman, I knew next to nothing, but I didn't realize it. I'd only been there about 2 days, and it was around 7 o'clock in the evening. I'll never forget it. A student came rushing to the dormitory. We were up on the 3rd floor of Douglas. I think it's still there. And they said, "Come down to the front of the library. We're going to burn Orville Faubus in effigy." Well, I'd never been to any burning in effigy before, and I haven't been to one since, as a matter of fact. So I went down there along with about everybody else on campus, and there was this straw figure in a suit of clothing with a sign hung around his neck. Orville Faubus, segregationist. Now that's a name you might not be familiar with, but he was governor of Arkansas at the time, 1957. And this was the beginning of the civil rights movement with vigor. President Eisenhower was in the process of integrating the schools in the South. And of course, many Southern governors, including Orville Faubus, were adamantly opposed to that and trying to stop it. Now, someone lit a match to this straw figure of Orville, and he went up in smoke. At least his effigy did. And that was a very profound moment for me, because that made me so much more acutely aware of the civil rights movement that was going on. And from that point forward, I began to become more engaged and to follow the news at every occasion on the events of the day. And it wasn't too long after that that Martin Luther King Jr. came on the scene and engaged in numerous activities in both the North and the South to develop awareness to the issue of civil rights. Now, in 1963, of course, he gave what I consider one of the three finest speeches ever given in American history, the I Have a Dream speech. And our president and myself must think along the same line, because I pulled two quotes from that, and she's already given it to you. How's that for stealing your thunder? But I'm going to give it to you again, because they are so powerful. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of the creed. Quote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that my 4 children will live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." Now, in the 60s, those of you who were alive at that time know that we had 3 horrible assassinations. The first was our president, John Fitzgerald Kennedy. I can remember exactly when I heard it, exactly where it was, and it's etched in my mind forever. A few years after that, his brother, Robert Kennedy, was assassinated. And then Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. And I can remember like it was yesterday, exactly where I was. I was standing in line at the Mercer Dairy Queen to order my nightly milkshake when I heard this horrible news. Our son, who was referred to here earlier, is a proud Thiel graduate, as well as our daughter. And when he graduated from Thiel, he couldn't find a job in the area. He was a computer science guy. But he had a cousin that lived in Atlanta, and he went down there and he had a job within a couple days. He called 7 of his Thiel buddies. He said, "Come on down, this is the land of opportunity." They all went down and they all got jobs. And I had passed through Atlanta a couple times on the way to Florida, but I never stopped and spent any time there. But when he moved to Atlanta, we had an opportunity to visit him on several occasions. One I will never forget. We were down there. I don't know, it was January or February. It snowed. They never heard of a snowplow down there. And people just left their cars in the middle of the road and walked away. I never saw anything like it. Our son was known to keep his refrigerator just about bare. We were lucky not to starve to death during that visit. But we survived. The snow melted pretty quickly. But Atlanta is a very rich city in terms of history. And I wanted to take as much of that history in as I possibly could. And one of the first things on my list was to visit Martin Luther King Jr.'s gravesite, which is on the land of the Ebenezer Baptist Church, where his father was the preacher and he was the preacher. And Ruth and I took a taxi cab out to Ebenezer Church, and it was a beautiful spring day, and there you could see Martin Luther King's crypt surrounded by a beautiful reflecting pool. And it was a moving experience for both of us, because you could reflect on the man and his life and his impact. Now, the grave is very close to the church. And after we had visited the grave site, Ruth and I went over to Ebenezer Baptist Church. And we walked in this side door, and we went in, a beautiful building, and there wasn't a single person in there but the two of us. And I couldn't restrain myself. I walked up on the stage and stood behind the podium. And I looked out. And I thought, I'm standing on the very place where every major civil rights leader of the civil rights era had stood and spoken, where Martin Luther King had spoken multiple times throughout his life, where world leaders had spoken, where presidents of this country had spoken, senators and congressmen. I was overcome. We stayed for 15 minutes or so, only ones there. And when it was over, we looked around, and there was the parsonage house where the minister of the church would have lived. And there was a sign, and I would have sworn it was called the Freedom Trail. But when I look it up on the internet, they say the Freedom Trail's in Boston, and this wasn't in Boston. But in any case, it was the road from the Ebenezer Church to downtown Atlanta. And when you stood there, it didn't look too far. And I said to Ruth, let's walk that. And we did. We reflected on that day. Now, Madison, you did a beautiful job of introducing me and hitting all the highlights. You didn't need to focus quite as much on my age, but I know that's a subject of conversation. We have one grandchild, Adam Michael Miller, who is 8. And when he started kindergarten, where he goes to school, they have a wonderful policy that all of the kindergarten students are assigned a 5th grader. It's sort of a big brother type situation. Someone to sort of guide them and look over them. And Adam had the very good fortune of being assigned a 5th grader, Romano. And Romano was black. And they bonded in a very, very special way. Thank you, Romano. Now, 3 years ago it would have been, he was in kindergarten. The teacher read to the class the Rosa Parks story. What a powerful story. What a special lady to do what she did. The courage and the determination. Well, the teacher read the story of Rosa Parks, and she must have done a very, very good job of it. Because a couple days later, the teacher, totally unrelated to Martin Luther King Day, she had the class sit down and she asked them a question and she said, "What do you wish for?" And 5-year-old kids, their minds are on toys and things. How old's little Malachi back there? 4. He's got a year to go. And it came to Adam. "Adam, what do you wish for?" And he said, "I wish everybody is treated alike." Don't we all? The message of Martin Luther King. Treat us alike. Thank you.
How y'all doing today? If you didn't know, I am Trevon Wilmer. I would first like to thank Thiel College for this award, as much as the powers that be, so the Diversity Board, Anthony Jones, everybody that was included. Apparently, I got nominated by multiple people, and I didn't even know it, and I didn't even vote for myself. Most people voted for themselves, and but I didn't do it, and somehow, some way, I'm up in here in front of you winning this award. For the reason for this award is interesting in bettering others. And where I'm from, I call it shore hospitality. And shore hospitality means making sure everybody is good and making sure everybody has a good well-being. I'm from the Eastern Shore of Maryland. A lot of people don't know what that is, but you've probably been there before. I'm from the Eastern Shore, so I live an hour from Ocean City, which is 7 hours from here, I know. I drive it by myself. And where I come from, on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, you will meet some of the sweetest people you've ever met. And that helped me mold to the person that I am today. My mom always told me, my mom is like everything to me, that there's no need to be rude to people. And that is a common fact. It's a common fact. In my life, I've always been interested in helping people. My mom told me, one of my teachers when I was in elementary school, that I would play with anybody. No matter if they were popular, no matter if they were like the weird kid in the corner, I would play with them. And that stands with me today. I will go up to random people and have a conversation with you, and I don't know you from, like they say, a can of paint. Now, some people go down the wrong road and just need guidance to be on the right path. Well, one of the steps of significance I have is just coming to Thiel. Now, I was going to join the Navy. I graduated in 2015, and I was going to join the Navy. I was going to be in the Seabees. I was going to be an electrician. Well, things don't work out like they seem, and everybody kept on telling me, "Trevon, why are you going to the Navy? Why are you going to the military? You should be in school. You're very smart. You're very intelligent. Why are you doing the things you do?" At one point, I just thought, I don't know. This is just something I want to do. But then I thought about it, that maybe I should really be in school. Now, I did a whole college experience by myself. So taking the ACT, I paid for it by myself. I paid to get my transcript sent off. I paid for my ACT scores to get sent off. I sat there and did research on what schools that I want to choose. I did it all by myself. But that shows that no matter what color you are, you can leave wherever you are, not just the Eastern Shore, and be very productive. In Dr. Martin Luther King's last manuscript, "Where do we go from here?" he said, "How many Negroes have forgotten that uneducated and poverty-stricken mothers and fathers often worked until their eyebrows are scorched and their hands bruised so their children could get an education?" I know for a fact my mom works very hard to give money in my pocket so I can go here. My mom's worked at the same place for 30 years, actually over 31, January 9th, at a hospital. And people often ask her, like, "How's Trey doing?" Like, the people that knew me when I was, little, and they're like, he's 22. 22? That's shocking, but I just shows that no matter how hard your parents work, that you can be the fruit of their labor and be somebody. That quote resonated with me greatly due to the fact that we are now reaping the benefits of what Dr. King and many other civil rights leaders were also reaping the benefits and the sacrifices made by the loved ones that were made in order to where we are right now. So many of us, and even the award recipients sitting in this room right now, there's people that got harassed, got put in jail, got water hose shot on them, got dogs put on them just so we can even be in this room. I used to mentor my younger friends. I want to say they were 4 years younger than me. So things that I could been through that I can always tell them, hey, don't do this, don't do that, don't get in trouble, don't do these things at school, stop messing around, get in school suspension. And right then at that point, I realized that I loved helping people. From there, as time progressed, I changed my major from criminal justice because I wanted to work at juvenile services, and I found out that you don't have to be a criminal justice major to work at juvenile services. To a psychology major, which happened my freshman year, in a micro-counseling class, the class that I wasn't even supposed to be in. It was a junior level class to be a psychologist. Life is what you make it, and if I could be a coach or just anybody a person could vent to and give them some advice, it would make me feel like the best person in the world. But other things in life that I want to do is open a mentor program where I could teach young men how to cook, wash, iron, fold their clothes, how to get dressed and prepare for an interview, have a professional conversation, even how to take a woman on a date, how to open doors, pull their chair out, things of that sort, pick out flowers. Now, some might think that's a lot, but I don't think that's a lot at all. It is steps to make a better generation after me. It's the little things that make you stronger. I'm going to leave you with a Maya Angelou quote. And I want you to think about this because for OBC, everybody's seen the shirts that we had this summer, for homecoming. If you hadn't, I can show you. Well, it was either the quote that they put on the shirt or this quote that I came up with. And ever since I found this quote, it has really resonated with me. It's, if you don't like something, change it. And if you can't change it, change your attitude. Because a lot of people can complain and say, I can't do this, or why isn't things like that? Well, if you're not going to complete and accomplish what you need to do, then you shouldn't be complaining at all. And then again, I would like to thank Thiel College for this award.
Good evening, everyone. So, although I am the coordinator of events and admissions, I will admit I do not like being the center of attention. As the coordinator of events, I get to actually ask others to speak, so this is kind of new for me. So first and foremost, I am truly honored and humbled to receive this award. For weeks, I will admit, everyone in admissions knows that I kept saying, I don't understand how or why me, but I genuinely appreciate it. But I will say, I actually went into higher education because I enjoyed assisting students, even as an undergrad, to achieve their dreams, goals, and aspirations. See, in admissions, I have seen our department give students the opportunity to attend college. Students that probably should not have attended college, we gave them that opportunity. One of these very students recently came into admissions to see me just to tell me, Angela, I just wanted to let you know that I'm officially a Thiel College alum. And instantly, I ran to Sonia's office and started crying. I was very proud for the fact that we gave a student that opportunity to achieve his overall goals and dreams. The theory in admission offices all across is that we enroll the students and then we just move on. For me, it is very important to continue the relationships after the students actually arrive to Thiel, to show the students that they have my continued support. There are students that I have known since the beginning of their senior year of high school. I have continued to stay in contact with them, and they are sitting here today in their final semester of their senior year. There are also students that I recall chasing down the hallway during a visit day to inform them that they received a scholarship. They are also in this room. I must say, I genuinely love our students here at Thiel College. I am hoping that the students know that since I am now, they dubbed me with the nickname Mom, to a large quantity of the student population, I want them to know that I genuinely appreciate all of you. As President Traverso had mentioned, Dr. Martin Luther King did mention, I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I must say, although we as a nation are not quite there yet, I can say that the majority of our student population and my colleagues here, we do hold this true. I am grateful that no one here, for the most part, judges by the content of their character or does not judge me by the content of my skin, but the content of my character. I believe our students know if they need someone to talk to, whether it's venting, crying, screaming, that they can come to admissions, and I will instantly drop whatever I'm doing to talk to them, even calling at random times of the night. Showing them that they have a support system away from home is very important to me. When I was in college, I had a support system, and hence why I wanted to do that for others. I will admit, I am the way that I am because of my mother. Although as a child, I was incredibly embarrassed every time we went into public, she, regardless of where we were, she always spoke to every single person she came in contact with. So many times we would be there for a very long time. But she has taught me to treat everyone with kindness because although we may all come from different walks of life, and although we may not all agree on the exact same things, it is important to treat them with kindness for the simple fact that you don't know what they're going through. So to my mom, thank you. However, I must say, I am certain that she has rubbed off on Malachi, which is my 4-year-old son. If ever you see us in public at a grocery store, he is sure to wave at you and say hi. He does it to every single person we come in contact with. They both have taught me a great deal about life, but no matter what, to be better than I was the day before. Over 5 years ago, during my interview, I looked to Sonia on my one-on-one and said, "You all act like a family here." And for that, I would like to thank not only the admission department, but the entire Thiel College community, because we are a family. So to everyone, thank you. To the students, thank you for being a great part of my life. You all make each day much brighter, and I truly appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you.
Wow. Like I gotta, like, you're getting it, but it's just like when you get it, it's just a really overwhelming feeling. I just remember being a student and being in OBC and organizing events like this one. And to be on this side of it is overwhelming. There's a lot of good memories that rush back to me. Like, I want to tell you all the stories, but I know I can't. And DT back there won't let me tell you. And that's great that, he came up here. He's a guy I went to class with and everything like that, and he's here. And I see some people that were in administration here and teachers and stuff, and it's just wonderful. I'd just like to thank everyone at Thiel who makes this place what it is, because every time I come back, it feels like home. It truly does. I'd like to thank the committee for recognizing the work that we're doing in Youngstown to save our school district. And I just, I'm getting off track, so I'm going to stick to my paper here. But I think I want to thank my wife. She came in from Nigeria 4 years ago to be here today. so she wanted. I absolutely had to make sure that I recognized her today. As you all know, if you have a wife, happy life, right? Yeah. So, you know what? Community service, it really starts at home. It starts with modeling what your family does, shoveling the neighbor's driveway, or asking a stranger that's stranded if they need help. That's where the basis of it starts. And it evolves when you have an opportunity to come to a school like Thiel and get involved in student services and student activities. And I just remember OBC, and we made a float for for homecoming, and we won. We won. I don't know if it's any of those pictures still around or not, but we were dressed. It was like an Egyptian theme, sort of like Remember the Time Michael Jackson video. It was really nice. But it was like the first time that we really had the opportunity to have a float, and Miss Quinny was behind that, you know. And she, one thing about her, when you're a part of OBC, when she came in, she was like, okay, everybody's going to get a position. I was a vice president of OBC, right? But I was like the third vice president over membership. So it's like we had like 5 vice presidents, but it made us have ownership over that organization. We used to have a house up here across from Hodge Hall, and it's no longer there. And we used to have parties. And back then I used to think, oh, is this a party we're having at Thiel? But now when I reflect back on my experience here, that party was a place for people like me to be able to find community. Part of being a part of Bridging the Gaps, that was a organization of students. We had we had some racial tensions and some other things going on, but we wanted to find a way to sort of get everybody together. So we had like a international food and art festival, and it just celebrated everyone's culture. You know, everyone. We tried to find the differences that we had in our communities at Thiel, bringing together, and we celebrated with food and art. But what we were doing really was giving a piece of ourselves to each other, being vulnerable to be able to accept other people's differences, and being willing to embrace everyone for who they were. During that time at Thiel, I had a son. My son's here today, and I was a month into being 19 when I knew that he was coming. And in this very building, as we used to call it, the HMC, I used a payphone. And for all you who don't know, a payphone is like this device where you put a quarter in there, and then you can make a phone call. You know, it wasn't that easy to call home, so I had to wait in line and use the phone and all that sort of thing. And I called my mother, and I'm trying to get the words out. I'm like, you know, this is, and she says, what? She's pregnant. She used her woman's intuition to out me, right? So I said, yeah. And what she said in that moment, my mother's here today, but what she said in that moment forever changed my life. She said, I want you to live to work and not work to live. And that was, and I still, like, for years, I think about that. It resonates with me even more today, but I always think about it. And being a philosophy major, I gotta, if you're not familiar with Khalil Gibran, his work, The Prophet, he talks in one of his sonnets where he says, work is love made visible. Work is love made visible. So what my mother and Gibran had in common was that they saw that if you align yourself with a mission and something you have value in, that love of that work is made visible and impacts people in a positive way. And it changes our community, it changes our society for the better. And I will always remember her for those words of encouragement that got me to where I'm at today, to be on this stage, to have this conversation with you. So I want to fast forward. I now serve on the Youngstown City School Board. This is my second term. And we are currently fighting a state takeover. The state takeover is called HB 70. It was legislation that was slipped into the State House, to the Senate without any community input. It was behind our backs. It did not include anyone that was involved in the Board of Education, anyone who was a rightful citizen of Youngstown, meaning that if you hold an office and if you're working for another organization that happens to be in the city, that doesn't necessarily mean that you are a part of that community until you truly embrace that community. And that's what happened to us. There were people who came together to make a plan on how education should be ran in Youngstown. But what they did was they made a dire mistake, because this plan that they have in play It takes away taxpayers' rights, voters' rights. It eliminates the ability for labor, for staff to have organized labor. And it also threatens to take away our public school system and give it to charter schools that may be private organizations and to other adjacent school districts. And so we're fighting so that we can have an education system in our community. We're fighting so that we can have viable jobs in our community that helps our community grow by educating our children. So when I look back on what we're fighting against, I have to look at some of the things that Martin Luther King Jr. and the other civil rights activists fought for. They fought for the right to vote. We're fighting so that votes are being recognized in Youngstown. They fought for government to use its resources to help the disenfranchised. We're fighting to keep our public dollars, our taxpayer dollars in our community. They fought so that there was equal rights for equal opportunities for employment. We're currently fighting for our workers to have an opportunity to have organized labor. They fought for equal access to education, and we are trying to fight to keep our school district in our city. Our public education, we're trying to fight to keep our public education system in Youngstown. And this is not just Youngstown, it's impacting other disadvantaged communities like Lorraine and East Cleveland. And we have band together as a statewide effort, and we fought this terrible legislation to a moratorium. And we currently have a lawsuit that's at the Supreme Court that we're fighting. We're waiting for that to come back. Oral arguments have been heard. And we're hopeful that there will be a change in legislation with House Bill 154 that will allow the community to have input in its education system. So what I gather from Dr. King is that when we see an injustice in our community or in our nation, we must act. We must do something. Because the arguments that came from the civil rights movement in the 60s are aligned with the arguments that we have today in 2020. There's work to do, and it's up to all of us to play our part in that role, to make sure that work is done. You know, just in preparation for today, I was talking to my son. He used to be a fixture up here when we were in school. My little son running around. He could come home on the weekends or through the week and that sort of thing. And so I'm connecting with him. He graduated from Kent State recently. He's an accountant. He works in the big city. And I said to him, I'm being honored at Thiel. You got to be there. And I said, oh, you got the day off because it's Martin Luther King's Day, right? And he said, oh, no. The way our contract is written is that we have 8 holidays, but we have 3 floating ones, and Martin Luther King isn't one of the 8 recognized holidays, so it must be used as a floating holiday. So for me, I told him, I was like, this doesn't feel right to me. It doesn't feel right at all that this day doesn't have the reference of the other holidays. But the point there that I wanted to look at was, okay, I can understand Christmas and Thanksgiving maybe being a little bit higher, but for the 4th of July, Memorial Day, Martin Luther King's Day is equal to those days, because that day and those other holidays I just mentioned define who we are as Americans. It totally defines it. These holidays, they remind us of our bravery, our courage, and our ability to overcome. This is not and should never be looked at as a day that just floats by us, as a day we use as I'll wait and take a day when it's sunnier outside, or it's cold outside today, I'll take that day, or to add on to extend a vacation. When you remove the purpose of the day, when you take the power away from the day, you diminish the movement. And we must remember that in our professional lives, in our home lives, and in our communities, that this day we must hold in high esteem so that it impacts our children, their children, and the rest of our community to be able to align our national consciousness with Dr. King's legacy. Thank you.